Sheriff Nathan Wade knew trouble by its shadow before its face. From his office window, he watched the Tuesday stage arrive, dust devils dancing in its wake. The townspeople scattered like startled quail, the banker Hollis yanking his wife indoors. Shopkeepers suddenly finding urgent business elsewhere. She descended from the coach with deliberate grace, Morocco leather case in one gloved hand, chin lifted against the desert wind. Her dress was Eastern too fine for frontier dust, but her eyes swept the street like a hunter reading signs. "That's her," Deputy Sam whispered. "The woman from Sweetwater. They say she destroyed 3 families with nothing but questions." Wade studied her measured walk toward the Imperial Hotel. 20 years wearing this badge. He'd faced gunmen, thieves, killers, but this woman carried something more dangerous than bullets. She carried truth. And in a town built on necessary lies, truth was a weapon nobody could defend against. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The Imperial Hotel's restaurant carried the mingled scents of chicory coffee and bacon grease when Wade entered the next morning. Catherine Sinclair sat alone by the window, her back straight as a fence post, studying the street over the rim of her china cup. The other diners had clustered themselves at the far end of the room, leaving her in a pocket of deliberate isolation. "Miss Sinclair," Wade approached, hat in hand. "I'm Sheriff Wade. Thought we should have a proper introduction." She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "I wondered when you'd come. Please, sit. And it's Mrs. Sinclair, though I'm widowed." Wade settled into the chair, noting how her direct gaze never wavered. Most people looked away when meeting a lawman's eyes. She studied him like she was reading a wanted poster. "Coffee," she offered, already pouring from the silver pot between them. "Thank you." He accepted the cup, the delicate handle awkward in his weathered fingers. "I understand you're a correspondent for an Eastern newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer." She set down the pot with practiced grace. "I write about frontier justice, how law establishes itself in places where civilization is still negotiable." "Nothing negotiable about law in my town, Mrs. Sinclair." "No." Her slight smile held no warmth. "Then perhaps you can clarify something for me. The Garrison family. 3 years ago, your records say they died of fever, yet the cemetery registry shows they were all buried on the same day. Remarkable coincidence for a fever, wouldn't you say?" Wade kept his expression neutral, though something cold settled in his stomach. "Fever can take a family quick out here. Happens more than you'd think." "I'm sure it does." She lifted a leather journal from her lap, pages marked with ribbon bookmarks. Though it's curious how the property transfers were filed before the death certificates. Almost as if someone knew they'd be dying. "Where did you get that information?" "Public records. Sheriff. Amazing what people file away and forget about." She closed the journal with deliberate care. "I spoke with Mrs. Chen this morning, the seamstress. She remembers making burial clothes for the Garrisons. Said young Emma Garrison's dress had to be altered to hide damage to the bodice. Strange requirement for a fever victim." Wade set down his cup harder than intended, coffee sloshing. "Mrs. Chen's getting old. Her memory isn't what it was." "Her memory seems quite precise about some things." Kat pulled a daguerreotype from her journal, sliding it across the table. "Emma Garrison. She was my student in Philadelphia before her family moved west. Brilliant girl. Wrote me letters every week until—" She paused, her composure cracking slightly. "Until the letters stopped." Wade studied the photograph. A young woman with hopeful eyes, maybe 17, standing beside a rose bush. He'd seen her once or twice in town before the incident, before the committee made their decision. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. "But some things are better left buried." She took back the photograph, her fingers gentle on its surface. "That's what the banker Hollis said yesterday. And Mrs. Dalton at the Mercantile. Even your deputy used those exact words, almost like you've all rehearsed it." Through the window, Wade could see townspeople gathering in small groups, casting glances toward the hotel. The morning sun threw long shadows across Main Street, and in those shadows, Wade glimpsed the truth of what his town had become, a place where secrets grew like tumbleweeds, rolling through lives and leaving damage in their wake. "You should be careful, Mrs. Sinclair," he said finally. "This isn't Philadelphia. Social rules are different here." "Oh, I'm learning that quickly." She poured herself more coffee with steady hands. "Yesterday, 3 men visited my room. They didn't introduce themselves, but one wore a judge's pin, another smelled of bank pomade, and the third had cattle dust on boots worth more than most men's yearly wage. They suggested I might find healthier air in another town. Might be good advice. Might be." She met his eyes again, and this time he saw steel beneath the Eastern manners. "But I've never been good at taking advice. Sheriff, my late husband was murdered 4 years ago, shot in the back while investigating municipal corruption in Baltimore. The police said it was a robbery, but nothing was taken. They advised me to accept their conclusion and move on. Did you?" "I wrote 17 articles about it. 3 city councilmen went to prison." She stood, smoothing her skirts. "I'm going to visit the cemetery now. Sheriff, would you like to accompany me? Or will you follow at a distance like yesterday?" Wade felt heat rise in his neck. He hadn't realized she'd noticed his surveillance. "I'll walk with you," he said, standing. "Someone should make sure you don't disturb the peace of the dead. The dead don't have peace, Sheriff. That's why they need the living to speak for them." They walked through the restaurant, conversations dying as they passed. Outside, the morning sun was already brutal, baking the dust and wooden sidewalks. Wade noticed curtains twitching in windows, faces appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The cemetery sat on a rise north of town, surrounded by a wrought iron fence that the desert wind had scoured of paint. Wooden markers outnumbered stone monuments 3-1, and prairie grass grew wild between the graves. Kat moved through the rows with purpose, finally stopping at a modest family plot. 3 stones, all bearing the same date, August 15th, 1881. Thomas Garrison, beloved husband; Margaret Garrison, devoted wife; Emma Garrison, cherished daughter. Kat knelt beside Emma's grave, her fingers tracing the carved letters. 18 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. She looked up at Wade. "There's black powder residue in the cracks of these letters, Sheriff. Like someone tried to clean blood off the stone but couldn't get it all." Wade removed his hat, running fingers through his thinning hair. The morning sun cast his shadow across the graves, and he thought about all the shadows he'd cast over the truth these past years. "There was trouble," he said quietly. "The Garrisons owned water rights. During the drought of 81, those rights became contentious. So, they were murdered. There was a dispute. It was resolved. Through violence. Through community decision." Kat stood slowly, dust on her skirts. "Community decision. Is that what you call it when powerful men decide who lives and dies? I call it survival. Mrs. Sinclair. This town exists because people made hard choices, and you enforce those choices. I keep the peace." "Whose peace?" She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her lavender soap fighting the desert dust. "The living, or the men who profit from the dead?" Wade replaced his hat, the familiar weight somehow heavier. "You're going to destroy this town." "No, Sheriff. This town destroyed itself 3 years ago. I'm just here to document the wreckage." As they walked back toward Main Street, Wade felt the ground shifting beneath his boots, like the earth itself was preparing to reveal what it had hidden. And for the first time in 3 years, he wondered if maybe it was time for the truth to surface, no matter how much damage it might cause. The Methodist church bell rang 7 times that evening, an unusual hour for congregation. Wade stood at the back of the sanctuary, watching townspeople file into pews that usually sat half-empty on Sundays. The kerosene heaters hissed in the corners, fighting the desert's night chill, while shadows danced across the whitewashed walls. Banker Hollis stood at the pulpit, his thick fingers gripping its edges. Friends, we've gathered to discuss a matter of community concern. As you know, we have a visitor who seems intent on disturbing our peace. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Wade noticed how the founding families occupied the front pews: the judge, the cattle baron Brennan, the merchant Davies. Their wives sat rigid beside them, gloved hands folded over leather-bound Bibles. This woman, Hollis continued, has been asking questions about matters long settled, spreading discord, making good people uncomfortable in their own town. She cornered my wife at the Mercantile, Davies called out, asking about the Garrison girl, wanting to know who her friends were. Mrs. Dalton stood, her voice shrill. She's been to the courthouse 3 times, demanding to see old records, property transfers, death certificates, things that aren't her business. What do you say, Sheriff? Judge Morrison's voice carried the weight of authority. You've spoken with her. Every head turned toward Wade. He felt their expectation pressing against him like summer heat. These people had elected him, trusted him to maintain their version of order. She's within her rights, Wade said carefully. Public records are public. Rights, Brennan spat tobacco juice into a brass spittoon. We got rights, too. The right to live peaceful without some Eastern busybody stirring up old grief. She should be encouraged to leave, the judge said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Sheriff, surely you can make her understand she's not welcome. Wade studied the faces around him. Good people, mostly. People who'd shared his table, helped raise barns, nursed sick children. People who'd also stood silent while the committee made decisions in back rooms, redistributing land and water rights like poker chips. I'll speak with her, Wade said finally. Tonight, Hollis insisted. Before she does more damage. Wade left before the meeting concluded, their voices following him into the darkness. Main Street stretched empty before him, lit only by the saloon's glow and scattered windows. The Imperial Hotel loomed 3 stories high, Mrs. Sinclair's corner room showing lamplight behind lace curtains. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. The hallway smelled of beeswax and lavender, too refined for a frontier hotel. He knocked on her door. Come in, Sheriff? It's unlocked. She sat at a small writing desk, papers spread before her, spectacles perched on her nose. Her hair was unpinned, falling in dark waves past her shoulders, making her look younger, more vulnerable. Leaving your door unlocked isn't wise, he said, removing his hat. Neither is attending lynch mob meetings, yet here we are. She removed her spectacles, folding them carefully. How did they vote? Am I to be run out on a rail? Or will tar and feathers suffice? Nobody's talking about violence, ma'am. No, just community encouragement to leave. She stood, moving to the window. Your banker Hollis already offered me $500 to go. When I refused, the offer became more pointed. Wade noticed the derringer on her bedside table, within easy reach. You should consider taking the money. This won't end well. For whom? She turned to face him, and in the lamplight he saw exhaustion beneath her composure. Sheriff, do you know why I chose the Garrison case? You said the girl was your student. She was more than that. Kat retrieved a packet of letters from her trunk, tied with blue ribbon. Emma wrote to me every week for 2 years. She told me about this town, about the people, about her dreams. She was going to come back east, attend normal school, become a teacher. She untied the ribbon with reverent fingers. Her last letter arrived 2 days before she died. She wrote that her father had refused to sell the water rights, that men had visited at night, making threats. She was frightened. Wade sank into a horsehair-cushioned chair, suddenly feeling his 48 years. Why didn't she leave? Her father believed in law. He believed the sheriff would protect them. Kat's gaze bore into him. Where were you that night? Sheriff Wade. The question hung between them like a hangman's noose. Wade studied his hands, remembering. I was told to patrol the South Road, check on the mining camps. When I returned the next morning, it was done. And you accepted that. What choice did I have? The committee? He stopped, the word bitter on his tongue. The committee. Yes. Emma mentioned them too, secret meetings. Decisions about who prospered and who failed. Your town's shadow government. She sat across from him, close enough that he could see the green flecks in her brown eyes. My husband was killed by such men. Baltimore's committee. They called themselves reformers, but they were just thieves with political cover. I'm sorry about your husband. His name was Michael. He was a good man who believed journalism could change things. He died for that belief. She paused, her voice softening. I couldn't save him, but maybe I can save Emma's memory. Give her family justice. Justice. Wade laughed, harsh and short. There's no justice here. Mrs. Sinclair. Just survival and compromise. You don't believe that, don't I? 20 years I've worn this badge. 20 years of keeping peace between people who hate each other, protecting the powerful from the desperate, enforcing laws that change depending on who breaks them. Justice. He shook his head. I stopped believing in justice the day I helped bury the Garrison family and called it fever. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hotel's settling timbers and distant saloon piano. Finally, Kat stood, moving to a covered tray on the bureau. I had dinner sent up. Too much for one person. She lifted the cloth, revealing roasted beef, potatoes, fresh bread. When did you last eat a meal, Sheriff? A real meal, not grabbed between duties. Wade tried to remember. Yesterday, the day before the widow Martinez had brought him tamales last week, but he'd given them to the prisoner in his jail. You don't eat with them anymore, do you? Kat set the tray on the small table between them, producing 2 china plates with blue willow patterns. Neither do I. Perhaps outcasts should share a meal. The gesture broke something in Wade, some wall he'd built between himself and the world. He watched her divide the food, her movements graceful despite the awkward circumstances. Why do you care? He asked quietly. About any of this? Emma's dead. The truth won't bring her back. No, but it might prevent the next Emma. She handed him a plate, their fingers brushing. Sheriff, you're not a bad man. You're a man who's been forced to do bad things. There's a difference. Is there? You're here. Aren't you warning me, despite your orders? She poured water from a pitcher, the crystal catching lamplight. That tells me something still matters to you beyond survival. They ate in companionable silence, 2 people finding unexpected comfort in shared isolation. Wade hadn't realized how hungry he was until the first bite. How long since food had been more than fuel. I can't protect you, he said finally. If you stay, if you continue this investigation, the committee will act, and I'll be powerless to stop them. I'm not asking for protection, Sheriff. I'm asking for truth. She leaned forward, her voice urgent. Help me understand what really happened. Not for publication, not for revenge, but for Emma. She deserves that much. Wade set down his fork, decision crystallizing. He thought of all the compromises, all the small lies that had built into mountains of deception. Maybe it was time for truth, even if it destroyed everything. The committee meets tomorrow night, he heard himself saying. Brennan's ranch. They'll decide what to do about you. He stood, retrieving his hat. Whatever you're going to do it fast. As he reached the door, her voice stopped him. Nathan. It was the first time she'd used his given name. Thank you for the warning, for listening, for still caring enough to struggle with this. Wade turned, seeing her silhouetted against the lamplight, This dangerous woman who threatened everything with nothing but truth. "Don't thank me yet, Catherine," he said. "We're not through this storm. We're just walking into it." The land office occupied a narrow building squeezed between the barber shop and the assessor, its windows clouded with years of dust and tobacco smoke. Wade held the door for Catherine as they entered, the brass bell above announcing their arrival. Clarence Tibbs, the clerk, looked up from his ledger with watery eyes that widened at the sight of them together. "Sheriff," Tibbs stammered, his pen dropping a blob of India ink on the page. "And Mrs. Sinclair. What brings you both here?" "Official business, Clarence," Wade said, his tone brooking no argument. "We need to see the survey maps for the Garrison property and surrounding claims." Tibbs's Adam's apple bobbed nervously. "Those are old records, Sheriff. Filed away. Might take some time to locate them." "We'll wait." Catherine moved to the map cabinet, running her fingers along the labeled drawers. "Section 15, Township 12, if I remember correctly from the courthouse documents." Wade watched her work with growing respect. She'd done her preparation thoroughly, knowing exactly what to look for. Tibbs had no choice but to retrieve the requested materials, unrolling yellowed survey maps on muslin that crackled with age. "Here!" Catherine traced her finger along faded property lines. "The Garrison Ranch, 160 acres. But look," she pointed to blue markings, indicating water. They controlled the only year-round spring for 20 miles. Every other ranch depended on their water access. During the drought of '81, Wade added, understanding dawning. That spring would have been worth more than gold. 10 times more, Tibbs muttered, then caught himself. "I mean, so I've heard." Catherine pulled out her notebook, sketching the property boundaries with quick, precise strokes. "Mr. Tibbs, who owns this land now?" The clerk's face went pale. "Why, the Brennan Cattle Company. Purchased legal and proper after the tragedy." "For how much?" Wade asked, though he suspected the answer. $200. For tax arrears." Tibbs wouldn't meet their eyes. The family had no surviving relatives to claim it. Catherine and Wade exchanged glances. A fortune in water rights sold for the price of a good saddle horse. The corruption was so blatant it was almost insulting. "We'll need copies of these maps," Catherine said calmly, though Wade could see her knuckles white as she gripped her pencil. After Tibbs reluctantly provided the copies, they stepped into the midday sun. Wade untied their horses from the hitching post he'd insisted on riding rather than taking a buggy, saying it would attract less attention. "The ranch is 5 miles north," he said, helping her mount the gentle mare he'd selected from the livery. "We should go now, while most folks are taking their noon meal." They rode in companionable silence through the desert scrub, sage and mesquite providing sparse shade. Catherine sat the saddle well for an Eastern woman, her back straight but relaxed. Wade found himself stealing glances at her. The way the sun caught the auburn hints in her dark hair, the determined set of her jaw. The Garrison Ranch appeared like a ghost against the landscape, its buildings weathered to the color of dust. The main house stood with its door ajar, banging occasionally in the wind. Wade dismounted first, hand instinctively checking his colt. "Stay close," he said, helping her down. "And if I tell you to run, you get on that horse and ride hard back to town." "I'm not leaving you," she said simply, and he knew arguing would be pointless. The house revealed its secrets reluctantly. Furniture remained in place, a horsehair sofa, a pine table set for dinner with plates still waiting. Dust covered everything in a thick shroud, but beneath it, Wade could see the signs Catherine had mentioned. Dark stains on the floor that someone had tried to scrub clean. Bullet holes in the walls, hastily patched but still visible to searching eyes. They weren't given time to pack, Catherine observed, lifting a child's porcelain doll from a chair. This was Emma's. She mentioned it in her letters. Wade moved to the kitchen, finding preserved goods still in the pantry, jars of peaches and tomatoes that Margaret Garrison had put up for winter, a family planning for the future, not dying of fever. "Sheriff," Catherine called from the back porch. "The root cellar." The wooden doors of the cellar were half buried in drifted sand. Wade cleared them and lifted one side, the hinges screaming protest. Cool air rose from the darkness, carrying the scent of earth and old vegetables. Catherine descended the wooden steps without hesitation, Wade following with a lit candle. The cellar held the usual stores: potatoes gone to sprout, onions hanging in braided strings, shelves of preserves. But Catherine went directly to the far corner, kneeling beside a loose stone in the wall. "How did you know?" Wade asked. "Emma wrote about her hiding place, where she kept her diary and treasures." Catherine worked the stone free, revealing a cavity behind. Her hand emerged with a leather-bound journal in a small wooden box. By candlelight, she opened the diary, reading Emma's careful script. "August 14th, the night before," she whispered. "Father says we must be brave. The men came again tonight. Mr. Brennan, Judge Morrison, Mr. Hollis. They say we have no right to keep water from dying cattle. But Father says law is law. They gave us one more day to sign the papers." Her voice caught. "Mother is crying. She thinks I don't hear. But I do." Wade took the journal gently from her trembling hands. The last entry was dated the morning of August 15th. "They're coming tonight. Father has sent me to hide this. If something happens, someone should know we didn't give up. We didn't betray what was right." They climbed from the cellar in silence, both processing the weight of Emma's words. As they emerged, a figure detached itself from the shadows of the barn: old Sam, the town drunk, swaying slightly, but his eyes clearer than Wade had seen in years. "Knew you'd come here eventually," Sam said, his voice rough from whiskey. "Been waiting." Wade's hand went to his gun. "Sam, what are you doing here?" "Same as you." "Sheriff? Looking for ghosts?" Sam shuffled closer, his clothes reeking of alcohol and neglect. "You know I was here that night, part of the committee's cleanup crew. They made me help bury them." Tears tracked through the dirt on his face. "That little girl, she wasn't dead yet. Brennan finished her while I held the lantern." Catherine made a sound of horror, and Wade steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Wade demanded. "Who'd believe the town drunk over the founding fathers?" Sam laughed bitterly. "Besides, they keep me in whiskey. The price of my silence, 40 pieces of silver, paid in rot gut." He shuffled away toward town, his warning drifting back. "They know you're here. Sheriff, committee's meeting tonight. You better decide which side of the grave you want to stand on." Wade and Catherine rode back in heavy silence, the weight of truth pressing down like the afternoon heat. As they reached the edge of town, Wade made a decision. "Come to my house," he said. "We need to discuss what happens next. And it's not safe at the hotel." His small house sat on a quiet street, removed from the main thoroughfare. It was modest but clean, the home of a man who lived simply. Wade had built it himself 10 years ago, back when he still believed in the future. Catherine surveyed the sparse furnishings: a leather chair, shelves of books, a single photograph of a younger Wade with a woman. "Your wife?" "She died 8 years ago. Pneumonia." He moved to the kitchen. "I haven't had a guest since the funeral." "Then I'm honored," Catherine said softly, and meant it. She surprised him by taking over the kitchen, finding ingredients in his meager pantry: salt pork, beans, cornmeal. "You sit," she ordered. "Let me cook while we talk." Wade watched her work, efficient and graceful, transforming his basic supplies into something that smelled like home. She'd removed her jacket, rolled up her sleeves, looking less like the dangerous Eastern journalist and more like a woman creating comfort in chaos. "The committee will move against you now," Wade said. "Sam's right about that. Then we'd better work fast." She stirred the beans in his cast-iron Dutch oven. "Tell me about the founding families. How did they gain so much power?" As the sun set, painting his small kitchen golden, Wade found himself telling her everything. How the town had been founded by men who believed might made right. How they'd systematically eliminated competition, using the committee to enforce their will. How he'd become sheriff, hoping to bring real law, only to become another tool of their control. "I'm a coward," he concluded. "I've known the truth for years and done nothing." Catherine set plates on his small table, the china he'd bought for his wife and never used since. "You're not a coward, Nathan. You're a man who was alone against impossible odds. But you're not alone anymore." They ate as darkness fell, sharing quiet conversation about other things, books they'd read, places they'd seen. For an hour, they were just two people finding unexpected connection, the violence and corruption waiting outside temporarily forgotten. As Catherine prepared to leave, Wade walked her to the door, then stopped. "There's something else you should know. After the committee meeting tonight, they'll likely take action. You should leave on tomorrow morning's stage. Will you come with me?" The question hung between them. Wade wanted to say yes, wanted to escape this prison of compromise he'd built. But he shook his head. "This is my town, my responsibility. I can't run from what I helped create." Catherine reached up, touching his face gently. "Then I won't run either. We'll face this together." After she left, Wade found an envelope slipped under his door. Inside, Mrs. Dalton's spidery handwriting. The Eastern woman was warned. If she stays, what happens is on your head. Sheriff. Wade crumpled the note, throwing it into his stove. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The memory of Catherine's presence lingered in his small house, the scent of her cooking, the warmth of her compassion, the steel of her determination. He'd found something worth fighting for again. Now he just had to survive long enough to fight. Mrs. Chen's tailor shop occupied a narrow storefront on 2nd Street, away from the respectable businesses of Maine. Catherine paused at the window, studying the neat rows of thread spools and the Singer sewing machine prominently displayed. Through the glass, she could see the elderly Chinese woman bent over her work, needle moving in precise, practiced strokes. The bell tinkled softly as Catherine entered. Mrs. Chen looked up, her dark eyes immediately wary. "Mrs. Sinclair," she said, her English accented but clear. "I heard you were visiting everyone." "Not everyone," Catherine replied gently. "Just those who might remember the truth." Mrs. Chen's needle paused mid-stitch. "Truth is a dangerous word in this town. May I sit?" Catherine gestured to a wooden chair near the counter. At Mrs. Chen's nod, she settled herself, choosing her words carefully. "You made burial clothes for the Garrison family." It wasn't a question. Mrs. Chen set down her sewing, her weathered hands folding in her lap. For a long moment, only the tick of the wall clock broke the silence. 3 years. Mrs. Chen finally said, 3 years I carry this." Catherine waited, understanding that silence could draw out truth better than questions. "They bring bodies in night. Back door." Mrs. Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Say fever. But I see everything when I prepare clothes." She stood abruptly, moving to a cabinet in the back of the shop. From beneath bolts of fabric, she withdrew a small ledger. "I keep record. Always keep record." She opened the book, pointing to entries in neat Chinese characters with English notes beside them. August 15th, 3 burial suits. Special instructions, high collars for all. Extra fabric at bodice for young woman. To hide wounds. Catherine's breath caught. Gunshot wounds. Throat cut for Mr. Garrison. 2 shots for Mrs. Garrison. The girl. Mrs. Chen's composure cracked. "The girl still breathing when they brought her. I hear her, soft like kitten. Then Mr. Brennan, he go in back room. When he come out, no more breathing." Catherine reached across, covering the older woman's hand with her own. "You've been living with this alone." "Not alone. Others know. We all know. but we also know what happens to people who talk. Mrs. Chen retrieved another item from her cabinet, a piece of blood-stained fabric. I keep this. From Emma's dress. Maybe someday. Someone care enough to listen. I care, Catherine said firmly. And so does Sheriff Wade. Mrs. Chen's expression shifted to something almost pitying. Sheriff Wade, good man in bad position. But good men who do nothing become bad men eventually. Catherine carefully wrapped the fabric evidence in her handkerchief. He's trying to change that. Will you tell him what you told me? If he asks, I tell. But Mrs. Sinclair, Mrs. Chen grasped her wrist with surprising strength. They watch you. Mr. Davies across street. He watch who comes here. By tonight, committee will know we talked. Catherine left the shop with the evidence tucked in her bag and a growing understanding of the fear that gripped this town. As she walked toward the hotel, she saw Wade striding toward the bank, his jaw set with determination. Inside the cattleman's bank, Wade found Hollis in his office, a mahogany-paneled sanctuary that reeked of cigar smoke and pomade. The banker looked up from his accounts ledger, the columns of numbers in India ink as precise as his moral calculations. Sheriff Wade. Hollis didn't offer him a seat. To what do I owe the pleasure? The Garrison property transfer. Wade remained standing, hat in hand, but stance rigid. I want to see the documents. That's ancient history. Sheriff, why the sudden interest? Because a federal marshal might be interested in how 160 acres with water rights sold for $200. Hollis's face flushed red above his starched collar. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. The journalist, Mrs. Sinclair, she's connected. Her late husband's family has influence in Washington. If she writes about this, investigators will follow. Hollis set down his pen carefully, ink glistening on its steel nib. This town exists because men like me make hard decisions. Sheriff, we brought civilization to wilderness. Sometimes that requires pruning. Pruning. That's what you call murdering a family. I call it survival of the fittest. Hollis stood, moving to his cabinet to pour whiskey from a crystal decanter. The Garrisons were selfish, keeping water from dying cattle during the worst drought in memory. Children were suffering. The town was dying. So you killed them. The committee made a decision for the greater good. Hollis sipped his whiskey. You've benefited from our decisions. Sheriff, your salary, your house, your position all exist because this town prospers. Rock that boat, and you'll find yourself drowning. Wade stepped closer, close enough to smell the pomade in Hollis's slicked hair. Maybe I'm tired of staying afloat on blood. Noble sentiment. But nobility doesn't put food on tables or keep order in streets. Hollis returned to his desk, pulling out a leather portfolio. Here's the transfer document. Perfectly legal. Signed by the territorial judge, filed properly. Unless you can produce the Garrisons to contest it, this matter is closed. Wade studied the document, noting Morrison's signature and seal. Everything proper and official. The machinery of law perverted to sanctify murder. Mrs. Sinclair should leave town, Hollis continued. Tonight's stage would be ideal. The committee is losing patience with her interference. Is that a threat? It's a kindness, Sheriff, to you. We'd hate to see you caught in unfortunate crossfire. Hollis's hand drifted to his desk drawer, where Wade knew he kept a pocket derringer. Community harmony requires everyone understanding their place. Wade set the document back on the desk. My place is upholding the law. Your place is whatever we say it is. Hollis's veneer of civility cracked. Don't forget who made you sheriff, Wade, and who can unmake you just as easily. Wade left the bank with Hollis's threat echoing in his ears. The afternoon sun was brutal, Main Street shimmering with heat mirages. He needed to warn Catherine, but as he turned toward the hotel, he saw Davies watching from his store window, Tibbs lurking near the land office, Mrs. Dalton's silhouette in the millinery shop. The whole town had become a web of surveillance. That evening, Wade sat in his parlor, the whale oil lamp casting dancing shadows on the walls. He'd sent word to Catherine to stay in her room, to lock her door. But he knew locks wouldn't stop what was coming. The knock came at 9 o'clock. 3 measured raps, neither polite nor aggressive. Wade opened the door to find 3 men in black dusters despite the warm night. Judge Morrison, Banker Hollis, and Brennan the cattle baron. They entered without invitation, their presence filling his small parlor like smoke. Morrison settled into Wade's leather chair without asking, his silver-headed walking stick across his knees. "Sheriff, we need to discuss the situation." "There's nothing to discuss," Wade replied, remaining standing. "On the contrary." Brennan moved to the window, peering through the curtains. "There's everything to discuss. This woman threatens our entire social order." "She threatens your crime," Wade corrected. Morrison's stick tapped the floor sharply. "Crime. We built this town from nothing. We brought law, commerce, civilization. Before us, this was wilderness ruled by Apache raids and Mexican bandits. And now it's ruled by you." "How's that different?" "Because we bring prosperity," Hollis interjected, standing by Wade's bookshelf, examining titles with false interest. "Under our guidance, this town thrives, families eat, children go to school, there's order. Built on murder. Built on necessity." Morrison's voice carried judicial authority. "The Garrisons made their choice. They chose selfishness over community. We chose the community over them." Brennan turned from the window. "Enough philosophy. Here's the reality. Wade, the woman leaves tonight, or we handle things our way. And if she refuses—" Morrison withdrew an envelope from his coat, thick with bills. $5,000. More than she'd see in a lifetime of writing newspaper stories. "She takes this and leaves. Everyone wins. Except the Garrisons. The Garrisons are past caring." Brennan's hand rested on the Colt at his hip, the threat unsubtle. "But you're not, Sheriff. Neither is she." Wade felt the moment crystallizing around him. 20 years of compromise, of looking away, of enforcing their version of law. He thought of Catherine's words about good men who do nothing. "I won't be your messenger boy," he said quietly. "You want her gone. Tell her yourself." The 3 men exchanged glances. Morrison stood slowly, his walking stick clicking against the floor. "That's disappointing, Nathan. We've had such a productive relationship. That relationship is over." "Is it?" Morrison moved closer, close enough that Wade could smell the tobacco on his breath. "You think you can stand against us, one worn-out sheriff against the entire power structure of this town? Maybe not, but I can try." Brennan laughed, harsh and ugly. "Try, you'll be dead before sunrise, and she'll still be gone, except without the money and with considerably less dignity." "Some things are better left buried, Sheriff," Morrison said, their scripted line delivered with practiced weight. "For everyone's sake." They moved toward the door, but Hollis paused. "You have until midnight to reconsider. After that, we solve this problem permanently." From his humidor box on the mantel, Brennan helped himself to one of Wade's cigars. A final insult. "Nice cigars, Sheriff. Cuban. Expensive for a lawman's salary. Makes a man wonder what other benefits you've enjoyed from our arrangement." They left, the door closing with finality. Wade stood alone in his parlor, the whale oil lamp flickering, casting his shadow large against the wall. He'd crossed a line tonight, chosen a side in a war he'd avoided for 2 decades. He loaded his Colt, then his Winchester, his movements automatic from years of practice. If they came for Catherine, they'd have to go through him. It wasn't much of a stand one aging sheriff against the committee's resources, but it was the first real stand he'd taken in years. A soft knock interrupted his preparations. He opened the door carefully, gun ready, to find Catherine on his porch, her derringer in hand. "I saw them leave," she said simply. "What did they want? You gone? Me compliant?" He stepped aside to let her in. "They offered $5,000. And when you refused?" They gave us until midnight. He studied her face, seeing fear beneath her composure, but also that steel determination that had brought her here. Catherine, you should take the money. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment Emma died. And she moved to the window, looking out at the dark street. Besides, they won't let me leave alive anyway. I know too much, and they know I won't stay quiet. Wade joined her at the window, their shoulders touching. Then we face them together. Together, she agreed. And in that moment, Wade felt something shift, not just in himself, but in the very air of the town. Truth had been spoken aloud, sides had been chosen, and whatever came at midnight, the committee's shadow would finally be challenged by light. The clock on his mantel showed 10:30, 90 minutes until the committee's deadline, 90 minutes to prepare for whatever violence they planned. But for now, Wade stood with Catherine, two people united against the darkness, and for the first time in years, he felt like a lawman again. The midnight deadline had passed without incident, leaving Wade and Catherine sleepless and wary. Dawn found them at Wade's kitchen table when old Sam stumbled through the back door, his clothes disheveled but his eyes clearer than Wade had seen in years. "Coffee," Sam croaked, collapsing into a chair. "Black and strong. Need to tell you something before the whiskey calls me back." Catherine poured from the pot, the bitter chicory steam rising between them. Sam wrapped his shaking hands around the tin cup, gathering himself. "You want to know about the committee?" Sam's voice was sandpaper rough. "I'll tell you. Been carrying it 20 years. Like stones in my gut." Wade leaned forward. 20 years. This goes back further than the Garrisons. The Garrisons were just the latest. Sam took a burning sip. Started in '64 when the town was barely more than tents and dreams. The founding families Morrison, Hollis's father, Old Man Brennan, they formed what they called the Vigilance Committee. Said it was to keep order until real law arrived. But real law never arrived, Catherine said softly. "Oh, it arrived. Sheriff before Wade, man named Thompson. He tried to bring proper justice. Found him face down in the river, whiskey bottle nearby. Called it a drowning. But Thompson never touched liquor." Sam's hands trembled harder. "I knew because I helped hold him under." Wade's coffee cup hit the table hard. "You were one of them. Was 17, orphaned, desperate. The committee took me in, gave me work. I was their messenger boy, then their cleanup man. 20 years of blood on these hands." Sam held up his weathered palms. "The Garrisons weren't the first family. The Mexicans who owned the salt flats gone. The Collins family with their freight business burned out. The Chinese miners who found gold in Crystal Creek disappeared one night. How many?" Catherine's voice was barely audible. 43 souls that I know of, maybe more before my time." Sam pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I kept count. Names, dates, how they died, my confession, I suppose." Wade studied the list, recognizing some names, others lost to time. "Why didn't you ever speak up? Who'd believe the town drunk?" Sam laughed bitterly. "Besides, they keep me in whiskey. $1 a day, and all I can drink to forget. Except I never forget. Every morning, I wake up knowing what I am." "You're speaking up now," Catherine said gently, covering his hand with hers. "Because I'm dying." Sam lifted his shirt, revealing a swollen belly. "Doc says my liver's done. Few weeks, maybe less. Figure I might as well die with one truth told." Catherine studied him intently. "Sam, do you know where the committee keeps their records?" "Records!" Sam laughed again, harsh and wet. "They're too smart for that. Everything verbal, nothing written." He paused, memory flickering. "Wait, there's one thing. Morrison. He's a lawyer. Can't help but document things. After the Garrison vote, I saw him put something in the church. Said it was insurance in case anyone got cold feet." Wade stood abruptly. "The church basement. Morrison's a deacon. Has keys to everything. He keeps things in the old vestry storage, Sam confirmed. Behind the communion supplies. Saw him down there after the Garrison business. They left Sam sleeping off his confession on Wade's sofa, the morning sun already heating the streets as Wade and Catherine approached the Methodist church. The building stood white and pristine, its steeple throwing a long shadow across the cemetery. Wade tried the front door locked, but the side entrance to the basement stood slightly ajar, the lock broken. They exchanged glances. "Trap," Catherine whispered. "Maybe. Or maybe we're not the only ones looking for truth." Wade drew his Colt, pushing the door open with his foot. The basement smelled of mildew and hymnal must. Weak light filtered through ground-level windows, illuminating rows of wooden pews stacked against walls, boxes of old Bibles, and forgotten church suppers serving dishes. They made their way to the back room marked vestry storage. Inside, communion supplies lined shelves, silver chalices tarnishing in the damp, brass plates growing verdigris, bottles of sacramental wine. Wade moved aside a wooden crate of prayer books, revealing a leather document case tucked behind. Catherine held the lamp as Wade opened it. Inside, papers yellowed with age, some foxed with moisture spots. But the writing remained clear, steel pen nibs having bitten deep into quality paper. "My God," Catherine breathed, holding up one document. "It's a formal vote. Look, the Vigilance Committee of Haven Creek, in session August 14, 1881, votes on the matter of the Garrison family." The names were all there, signed with flourishes of self-importance. Morrison, Hollis, Brennan, Davies, even Preacher Dalton. Beside each name, a mark I for death. Unanimous. Wade said quietly. They all voted to kill them. Catherine dug deeper, finding more documents. It goes back years. Every decision, every family destroyed. They actually kept minutes like they were a legitimate government. In their minds, they were... Wade studied a ledger showing property transfers after each removal. "Look at this. Every time someone disappeared, their land ended up with committee members within months. Murder for profit, dressed up as community service." Catherine's voice shook with rage. "And Preacher Dalton sanctified it all." A footstep on the stairs made them both freeze. Wade pushed Catherine behind him, gun raised, as a figure appeared in the doorway. Preacher Dalton stood there, his usually pompous face drawn with exhaustion. "I thought I'd find you here," he said tiredly. "Sam came to me after leaving your house. Sheriff. Wanted to confess before he died. Told me about showing you this place." "You knew," Catherine accused, stepping from behind Wade. "You knew about all of it?" "I knew." Dalton moved into the room, his black coat dusty in the lamplight. "To my eternal damnation, I knew and stayed silent." "Why?" Wade demanded. "You're supposed to be a man of God." "Because I'm also a man of weakness." Dalton sank onto a storage crate, suddenly looking his 70 years. "They had leverage. My son, back east. He'd embezzled funds. The committee paid his debts, kept him from prison. The price was my silence and my signature on their documents." "You traded your soul for your son," Catherine said. "Yes, and I've regretted it every day since." Dalton reached into his coat, and Wade tensed, but the preacher pulled out only a brass key. "This opens the cabinet behind the altar. More documents there. Financial records showing how the committee laundered their blood money through the church building fund." Wade took the key, its weight heavier than metal should be. "Why give this to us now?" "Because Sam's right. We're all dying, some faster than others. Maybe if the truth comes out, God will show more mercy than I deserve." Dalton stood to leave, then paused. "Mrs. Sinclair, when you write about this, remember that evil rarely arrives as a monster. It comes as a friend offering safety, prosperity, order. We all thought we were building something good. By the time we realized the cost, we were too deep in blood to escape." After Dalton left, Catherine and Wade worked in silence, gathering documents, organizing evidence. The sun climbed higher, sending dusty light through the basement windows, illuminating decades of carefully documented atrocity. "I can't publish all of this," Catherine said finally. "Surrounded by papers, it would destroy everyone in town, the innocent along with the guilty." "Isn't that what truth does?" Wade asked, though his heart wasn't in the cynicism. "Truth should heal, not just wound." She held up the Garrison voting document. "This I'll publish. The rest, maybe the threat of exposure is enough to break their power." Wade studied her, this complicated woman who'd arrived seeking simple revenge but found complex reality. "You're showing them mercy they never showed anyone." "No, I'm showing wisdom. Emma wouldn't want the entire town destroyed for her justice." Catherine began carefully packing selected documents into her bag. "But the committee's stranglehold ends now." They sat in the dim basement, surrounded by evidence of human cruelty and institutional corruption. Wade pulled out his flask of medicinal whiskey, offering it to Catherine. She took a sip, grimacing at the burn. "You know what the real crime is," Wade said, taking his own drink. "We all knew. Everyone in town knew something was wrong. We just chose comfort over conscience. You're changing that now. Too late for the 43. But not for the next 43. Catherine moved closer to him on the crate, their shoulders touching. "Nathan, you asked me once about justice. I've been thinking about that. Justice isn't just punishment for the guilty. It's also redemption for those who choose truth, even late." Wade felt the warmth of her presence, the unexpected comfort of someone who understood his failures without condemning him entirely. In that case, maybe there's hope for us all. Maybe. She turned to face him, her eyes serious in the lamplight. "When this comes out, you'll lose everything. Your position, your home, maybe your life. I lost everything worth keeping years ago when I chose safety over righteousness." He met her gaze steadily. "What about you? This story will make you enemies far beyond this town." "I've had enemies before." She touched the documents in her bag. "But I've never had an ally like you. Someone who understands the cost of truth and chooses it anyway." They sat in companionable silence, two people bound by dangerous knowledge and fragile hope. Outside, the church bell tolled noon, its bronze voice carrying across the town that would soon learn its founding myths were built on murder. Wade stood, offering Catherine his hand. "Come on. We need to secure these documents before the committee realizes what we have." As they climbed the stairs into blazing daylight, Wade felt the weight of decision. They held enough truth to destroy or redeem the town. The choice of how to use it would determine not just Haven Creek's future, but their own soul's salvation. The brass desk lamp in the church office caught the afternoon sun as they passed, throwing prisms across the walls like scattered possibilities. Wade thought about light and shadow, truth and lies, and how sometimes the greatest courage was knowing which revelations would heal and which would only deepen wounds. They emerged from the church carrying their burden of truth, ready to face whatever violence or redemption it would bring. By the next morning, Haven Creek had transformed into a town of turned backs and shuttered faces. Catherine stood at the mercantile counter, her simple request for writing paper met with stony silence. Mr. Davies busied himself with inventory, pretending not to hear her. "Mr. Davies?" she said more firmly. "I'd like to purchase paper and ink." "We're out of stock," he replied without looking up from his ledger. Catherine glanced at the shelves clearly displaying both items. "I can see them right there. Those are reserved for regular customers." Davies finally met her eyes, his expression cold. "You're no longer welcome here. Mrs. Sinclair." The bell above the door jangled as Mrs. Dalton entered, saw Catherine, and immediately turned to leave. Other customers followed suit, evacuating the store as if Catherine carried plague. She left with quiet dignity, but Wade saw her hands trembling as she met him outside. "The hotel asked me to leave this morning," she said. "Gave me until noon to pack." "Come to my house," Wade offered. "That will only make things worse for you." She touched his arm gently. Nathan, you can't shield me from an entire town. They walked down Main Street together, and it was like Moses parting the Red Sea. People stepped off sidewalks to avoid them. Mothers pulled children inside. Men spat tobacco juice at their feet. The town's judgment was absolute and coordinated. At the sheriff's office, Deputy Sam Fletcher waited, his young face miserable with reluctance. "Sheriff?" he began, then had to clear his throat. "Sheriff Wade, I've been asked to deliver something." He handed Wade an envelope sealed with wax. Wade recognized Judge Morrison's seal. Inside, the message was brief. "Emergency town council meeting. Your attendance required immediately." "Sam," Wade said quietly, "you're a good deputy. Remember that when this is over." "When what's over, Sheriff?" "You'll know soon enough." Wade pinned his star more firmly to his vest. "If I don't come back from this meeting, you're acting sheriff. Try to be better than I was." Sam's Adam's apple bobbed nervously. "You're coming back, aren't you?" Wade didn't answer. Instead, walking to the courthouse where the council convened. The meeting room was full, all 5 council members, prominent businessmen, even Preacher Dalton looking gray and defeated. Judge Morrison presided from the head of the table, his gavel gleaming like a weapon. "Sheriff Wade," Morrison began without preamble, "serious allegations have been made about your conduct." "What allegations?" Wade remained standing, refusing to take the defendant's seat they'd left for him. Banker Hollis cleared his throat. "Dereliction of duty, failing to maintain public order, consorting with a troublemaker who threatens community harmony." "You mean investigating murders and protecting a citizen's rights?" "We mean," Brennan interrupted, his voice hard, "choosing an outsider over your own people." Morrison gavelled for order. "Sheriff Wade, this council requires you to escort Mrs. Sinclair to the stage depot immediately. She is no longer welcome in Haven Creek, and if she refuses to leave, then you will arrest her for disturbing the peace." "What peace?" Wade looked around the room. "The peace bought with blood. The quiet of a graveyard." Morrison's face darkened. "You forget yourself, Sheriff." "No, Judge. I finally remember myself." Wade unpinned his star, feeling its familiar weight one last time. The tin caught the light from the tall windows as he set it on Morrison's desk. "I've been sheriff of nothing, protecting no one. Keep your tin star." "If you resign, you lose all protection of the office," Morrison warned. "Your house, your pension, any standing in this community." "What community?" Wade looked at each man in turn. "A community built on murder isn't worth protecting." He walked toward the door, but Brennan's voice stopped him. "Wade, we've been patient because of your years of service, but that patience is gone. Get the woman out of town, or we will. And we won't be gentle about it. Touch her, and you'll answer to me." Brennan laughed. "You without a badge. You're just another drunk like Sam, living on our sufferance." Wade left the courthouse with empty hands and a lighter heart than he'd felt in years. The weight of compromise was gone, replaced by the dangerous freedom of having nothing left to lose. He found Catherine at his house, her trunk already packed. Through the window, he saw smoke rising from behind the church, black smoke that could only mean burning paper. "They're destroying the evidence," Catherine said quietly. "I saw Morrison and 2 men go into the church an hour ago. They must have found what we discovered." Wade checked the drawer where they'd hidden the most damning documents. Empty. "They searched my house while I was at the meeting. I'm sorry. Nathan, I brought this on you." "No." He moved to face her. "You brought me back to life. I'd been sleepwalking for 20 years. A knock at the door interrupted them. Deputy Fletcher stood on the porch, clearly uncomfortable. "The stage leaves in an hour. Mrs. Sinclair, the council, strongly suggests you be on it." Catherine nodded. "I'll be there." After Sam left, she turned to Wade. I have to go. If I stay, they'll destroy you completely. They already have. No, you're still alive, still free. If I stay, that changes. She moved to her trunk, checking the locks. I kept copies of some documents, hidden them in the lining. Enough to write the story, to bring federal attention if needed. Wade helped her with the trunk, their hands touching on the leather handles. Catherine, don't say it. Her voice caught. Don't make leaving harder than it is. They loaded her belongings onto Wade's small wagon, driving to the depot in silence. The afternoon sun was brutal. Main Street nearly empty as people avoided witnessing what everyone knew was happening. At the depot, the stage sat ready, horses stamping in the heat. Wade helped her aboard, then stood holding her gloved hand through the window. Around them, he felt watching eyes committeemen ensuring she left. Townspeople witnessing his final disgrace. Come with me, Catherine said suddenly. There's nothing for you here now. Wade wanted to accept, to climb aboard and leave this poisoned place forever, but he shook his head. I helped create this. I need to face what comes next. They'll destroy you. Maybe. Or maybe my standing up will inspire others. He squeezed her hand. Someone needs to witness what happens after truth is spoken. The driver called out, preparing to leave. Catherine leaned through the window, pressing something into Wade's hand, Emma Garrison's diary, the one piece of evidence she'd kept back. For when you need to remember why truth matters, she said. Catherine. He held her hand tighter, words tumbling out. That first day, you asked me about justice. I didn't have an answer. Now I do. Justice isn't about punishment or even fairness. It's about choosing truth, even when lies are safer. You taught me that. Tears tracked down her cheeks. You taught me something too. That courage isn't the absence of fear or failure. It's continuing despite them. The driver cracked his whip, and the stage lurched forward. Wade walked alongside as long as he could, their hands clasped until distance forced them apart. He stood in the dusty street, watching the stage disappear into heat shimmer and distance, taking with it the only person in 20 years who'd seen him as more than his compromises. Back at his empty house, Wade found an eviction notice nailed to his door. 30 days to vacate. His accounts at the bank would be frozen, his credit at stores canceled. The committee's punishment would be complete economic and social exile. But on his kitchen table sat his Colt and Winchester, cleaned and loaded, a note in Sam Fletcher's handwriting. Some of us remember what you did for this town before the committee ruled everything. We remember, and we're grateful. Wade sat in his leather chair as darkness fell. Emma's diary in his lap, his weapons within reach. He'd lost his badge, his position, perhaps his future. Catherine was gone, taking with her the promise of redemption through connection. But for the first time in 20 years, Nathan Wade felt clean. The committee could take everything external, but they couldn't touch what Catherine had awakened, the knowledge that one man standing for truth was worth more than a lifetime of comfortable compromise. Outside, voices carried on the night wind, men gathering, planning, deciding his fate. Wade opened Emma's diary, reading by lamplight her words about courage and conviction. He'd failed her in life, but perhaps in standing firm now, he could honor her death. The clock struck midnight. Wade heard footsteps on his porch, saw shadows moving beyond his windows. They'd come for him as promised. But this time, he wouldn't step aside, wouldn't turn away, wouldn't choose safety over righteousness. He stood, facing the door, ready for whatever violence or redemption the night would bring. Catherine was safe. The truth was spoken even if the evidence was burned, and Nathan Wade was finally, fully, himself again. The door opened, and his real test began. Wade stood frozen as his door swung open, but instead of the committee's gunmen, 7 women entered his house. They moved with quiet purpose, Mrs. Chen leading them, her usually submissive posture replaced with steel determination. Behind her came Mrs. Martinez, the widow who sometimes brought him food, Mrs. Schmidt, who ran the boarding house, Mrs. Patterson, whose husband had died in a mining accident 5 years ago, young Mrs. Collins, pregnant and fierce, Mrs. O'Brien from the laundry, and surprisingly, Mrs. Fletcher, Deputy Sam's mother. "We've been silent 20 years," Mrs. Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of those decades. "Our husbands, brothers we know who really killed them." Wade sank into his chair, overwhelmed. "You knew, all of you. Women always know," Mrs. Martinez said quietly, her accent thickening with emotion. "We wash the blood from clothes. We prepare bodies for burial. We comfort widows. We see everything." Mrs. Chen moved to his table, setting down a worn sewing box. From hidden compartments beneath the spools and needles, she withdrew items that made Wade's breath catch: a blood-stained piece of cloth, spent bullets, a lock of hair tied with ribbon. "Evidence," she said simply. 20 years of evidence. My husband Thomas." Mrs. Patterson spoke up, her voice trembling but determined. "Didn't die in a mine collapse. He was organizing the miners to demand fair wages. The committee had him killed, made it look like an accident. But I kept the rope they hanged him with. It has Brennan's brand burned into the leather." Mrs. Collins added her own testimony. "My father-in-law owned the freight business before Davies. One night, they came for him. Said he was setting prices too low, hurting established businesses. I was hiding in the root cellar with my husband. We heard everything, saw them through the floorboards." "Why didn't you speak before?" Wade asked, though he knew the answer. Who would listen? Mrs. Schmidt's Germanic accent grew stronger with anger. The sheriff who looked away, the judge who signed false documents, the preacher who blessed their crimes. "We had children to protect," Mrs. O'Brien added. "Speaking meant death or exile, so we stayed quiet. But we remembered. We kept records." Mrs. Chen opened another compartment in her sewing box, revealing a small leather journal. Every death, every theft, every lie, written in Chinese so they wouldn't know if they found it, but also translated, hidden elsewhere. Mrs. Fletcher, who'd been silent until now, stepped forward. "My Sam's a good boy, Sheriff. He doesn't know what his father was part of before he died, but I know, and I've kept William's confession letter, the one he wrote before his heart gave out, named names, described murders." Wade looked at these women, seeing them truly for the first time, not just shopkeepers' wives or widows scraping by, but witnesses to atrocity who'd maintained their own form of justice through memory and evidence. "What do you want to do with this?" he asked. "We want justice," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Not revenge, justice, legal, proper, documented justice." A knock at the door interrupted them. Wade reached for his gun, but Mrs. Chen stayed his hand. "We sent word," she said mysteriously. The door opened to reveal Catherine Sinclair. Wade's heart stopped, then raced. "Catherine, you left. I saw the stage. I got off at Miller's Creek," she said, entering with 3 men behind her. "I'd like you to meet Federal Marshal James Crawford, Mr. Harrison from the Territorial Prosecutor's Office, and Mr. Edmund Halpern, my editor from Philadelphia." Marshal Crawford was a tall, weathered man with eyes that missed nothing. He surveyed the room, noting the women, the evidence spread on the table, Wade's defensive posture. "Ladies," Crawford tipped his hat. "Mrs. Sinclair told me you might have information about federal crimes, mail fraud, if property was stolen through false documents sent by post, interstate commerce violations if goods were seized illegally. These are federal matters, outside local jurisdiction. We have 20 years of evidence," Mrs. Chen said, gesturing to the table. Crawford examined the items carefully while Harrison took notes. This rope with the brand that's evidence of murder. These documents show systematic theft. And if what Mrs. Sinclair tells me about the Garrison family is true. It's true, Wade said. I was sheriff then. I was ordered to patrol elsewhere that night. When I returned, they were dead. Will you testify to that? Harrison asked. Wade met Catherine's eyes across the room. She nodded slightly, encouragement and understanding in her gaze. Yes, Wade said. I'll testify to everything I know. The prosecutor turned to the women. And you'll all testify. We will. Mrs. Chen confirmed. Together, they can't silence all of us. Marshal Crawford stood. Then I need to deputize some men. Former Sheriff Wade, I'm reinstating you as a federal deputy for this investigation. We're going to arrest the committee members tonight. Tonight, Wade was stunned by the speed. But they control everything. Not everything, Catherine interrupted. While you thought I was leaving, I was actually at Miller's Creek, telegraphing my story to newspapers across the country. By tomorrow morning, Haven Creek will be famous for all the wrong reasons. The committee's power ends when the world watches. Edmund Halpern, the editor, spoke for the first time. The story's already set in type. Vigilante justice: how one town's elite became judge, jury, and executioner. It'll run in 20 papers by week's end. Through the window, Wade saw lights gathering in the street. Not the committee's men, but ordinary citizens, shopkeepers, miners, ranch hands. Word was spreading through the town like wildfire. How did they know? Wade asked. We told them, Mrs. Fletcher said proudly. While the committee met in their closed rooms, we talked in kitchens, over wash lines, at the well, the real community, sheriff, the one that actually keeps this town running. Crawford checked his pocket watch. It's nearly midnight. Mr. Wade, I need you to guide us to the committee members' homes. We'll arrest them simultaneously, prevent them from warning each other or escaping. Wade strapped on his gun belt, feeling the familiar weight with new purpose. Brennan has a ranch 5 miles out. He'll run if warned. My husband and sons are watching the roads, Mrs. Martinez said. He won't escape. You organized all this? Wade asked, amazed. Women organize everything, Sheriff, Mrs. Chen said with a slight smile. Men just take credit for it. They moved through the dark streets, Crawford and his men efficient and professional. At the bank, they found Hollis burning papers in his office. He looked up, face white with fear when he saw the federal badges. Federal authority, Crawford announced. You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and fraud. Hollis reached for his desk drawer, but Wade was faster, pinning his hand to the desk. No Derringer this time, Hollis. They found Judge Morrison at home, drinking whiskey in his study. He didn't resist, seeming almost relieved. I wondered when this day would come, he said quietly as they cuffed him. Every night for 20 years, I wondered. Brennan tried to run. They caught him at the edge of town, his saddlebags full of gold and documents. He cursed and threatened, invoking powerful names, promising retribution. Crawford was unmoved. Your friends in high places can't help you now, the marshal said. This is federal jurisdiction, and the whole country's watching. By dawn, the committee members sat in the jail Wade had once run. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Outside, townspeople gathered, some angry, some confused, many relieved. The younger families, those who'd arrived after the worst crimes, demanded answers. Wade stood on the jailhouse steps, exhausted but purposeful. For 20 years, this town lived under shadow rule. Men who claimed to protect you were actually protecting themselves. That ends today. What about you, Wade? Someone shouted. You were sheriff. You knew. I knew and did nothing, Wade admitted. I'm as guilty as anyone of cowardice. But these women, he gestured to Mrs. Chen and the others, they kept the truth alive when the rest of us surrendered to lies. Catherine stood beside him, her presence both comfort and strength. She addressed the crowd in her clear, carrying voice. The story of Haven Creek will be told across America. You can be remembered as the town that harbored killers, or the town that chose justice even when it was hard. The choice is yours. Young Sam Fletcher stepped forward, still wearing his deputy badge. I stand with Sheriff Wade, he said, voice cracking but determined. My father was part of the old ways, but I choose the new. Others followed, young couples, new merchants, miners who'd always suspected the truth. The town split, but didn't shatter, the majority choosing justice over comfortable lies. Crawford addressed the crowd. There will be trials, federal judges, impartial juries. Anyone with information should come forward. Justice will be done, but it will be done legally. The sun rose over Haven Creek, painting the dust-covered buildings gold. Wade stood with Catherine and the 7 women who'd saved the town's soul. Mrs. Chen held her sewing box. Evidence, now testimony to courage rather than hidden shame. You did it, Wade said to her. You all did what I couldn't. We did it together, Mrs. Chen corrected. Even courage needs community. Catherine took Wade's arm. The federal prosecutor says you'll need to testify in the trials. They'll likely last months. And after? Wade asked, hardly daring to hope. After? Haven Creek will need a real sheriff. Crawford's recommending you for federal appointment. A chance to rebuild this town on truth rather than lies. Wade looked at the women who'd risked everything, at the young families choosing difficult honesty over comfortable deception, at Catherine who'd returned despite danger. We all get a second chance. No, Catherine said firmly. We get a first chance to do things right. The committee would face justice, legal, documented, proper justice. The town would heal slowly, painfully, but genuinely, and Wade would spend whatever years remained to him trying to earn the courage these women had shown, protecting the vulnerable instead of the powerful. As wagons arrived to transport the prisoners to federal custody, Wade noticed Mrs. Chen distributing mourning jewelry to the women, lockets containing hair from victims, a tradition of remembrance and resolve. For 20 years, we mourned in secret, she said. Now we mourn in daylight, and that changes everything. Wade understood then that courage wasn't a single act but a collective awakening. One person standing alone could be crushed, but a community standing together could remake itself entirely. The committee had ruled through fear and isolation. They'd been defeated by connection and stubborn memory, by women who refused to let truth die even when speaking it seemed impossible. The federal marshals loaded the prisoners as the town watched. Morrison, Hollis, Brennan, and Davies, men who'd seemed invincible, now looked small and old. Their power evaporated like morning dew. The violence they'd threatened never materialized, because violence needs darkness and isolation to thrive. In the light of collective witness, it simply disappeared. 6 months had passed since the committee's arrest, and Haven Creek barely resembled the town it had been. Wade stood at the window of the sheriff's office, his office again, though now by federal appointment rather than local election. The star on his vest caught the morning light, newly polished, the weight of it different now that it represented genuine law rather than sanctioned corruption. Main Street bustled with unfamiliar energy. Young Sam Fletcher, now his chief deputy, was helping newcomers from the morning stage find the land office. The Brennan Cattle Company building had been converted into a newspaper office. The truth teller painted in bold letters across the front window. Inside, Wade could see Catherine at her desk, typewriter keys clacking as she worked on another story. The federal trials had concluded 2 weeks ago. Morrison and Hollis received 20-year sentences for conspiracy and fraud. Brennan got life for the murders he'd personally committed. Davies and several others received lesser sentences but would still spend years in federal prison. The territorial prosecutor, Harrison, had been thorough and merciless, using the women's carefully preserved evidence to build unshakable cases. Sheriff, Sam Fletcher entered, carrying a telegram. From the federal marshal's office. They're confirming your permanent appointment. Wade read the brief message, relief washing over him. He'd served as provisional sheriff during the trials, but this made it official. The town had voted overwhelmingly to request his appointment, the younger generation especially vocal in their support. Also, Sam added, the stonemason says the memorial will be ready for unveiling tomorrow. Wade nodded. The town had voted to create a memorial for the committee's victims, all 43 names that old Sam had documented before his death 3 months ago. He'd lived just long enough to testify. His conscience finally clear. They'd buried him with honor. The bottle of whiskey in his coffin more symbol than sustenance for the journey ahead. Wade walked across the street to the newspaper office. The door's bell chimed as he entered, a sound that always made Catherine look up with a smile that transformed her serious face. She wore a practical gray dress now instead of Eastern finery, ink stains on her fingers marking her as a working journalist. "The memorial's ready," he told her. "Good." She blotted the page she'd been working on. "I've just finished my final article on the trials. Edmund wants it for a book, The Haven Creek Reckoning. He's calling it. Will you mention the women's role? They're the heart of it. Mrs. Chen especially. Without their courage, none of this would have happened." She stood, stretching. "Have you heard from the Garrison relatives? They're coming for the memorial. Emma's cousin from Chicago. She wants to thank you for everything you've done." Catherine moved to the window, watching the town's transformation. Where the Imperial Hotel had stood, a new building was rising, a proper school, funded by the sale of seized committee assets. Young Mrs. Collins, now a widow after her husband's mining accident, would be the first teacher. "The town's healing," Catherine observed. "Faster than I expected." "Truth does that," Wade replied. "Once people stop spending energy maintaining lies, they can build something real." The next morning dawned clear and cool, unusual for the desert. The entire town gathered at the cemetery, transformed now with proper paths and a new iron fence. The memorial stood in the center, a granite obelisk with all 43 names carved deep, topped with a figure of justice holding scales. Wade stood with Catherine as Preacher Dalton, somehow both diminished and strengthened by his confession, led the service. Mrs. Chen and the other women who'd preserved evidence stood in places of honor. The younger generation filled the spaces between, their children playing quietly among the headstones. "We gather not in grief alone," Dalton said, his voice carrying across the crowd, "but in commitment to remember. These names represent our failure as a community, but also our capacity for redemption. Let no one forget, and let no one repeat." After the formal service, Wade and Catherine walked to the Garrison family plot. 3 new granite headstones replaced the original markers. Inscriptions telling the truth, murdered for defending justice. Emma's stone included a line from her last letter, "Courage is standing firm when standing alone." Catherine knelt, placing wildflowers on Emma's grave. "She would be proud," she said softly. "Her death meant something." Wade helped her stand, and they remained before the memorial, hands naturally finding each other. The crowd had dispersed, leaving them in peaceful solitude. "You're the only one who didn't run from the truth," Wade said quietly, squeezing her hand. "When everyone else accepted comfortable lies, you demanded uncomfortable honesty." Catherine looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You're the only one who didn't run from me. Even when I brought danger and destruction to everything you'd built." "Everything I'd built needed destroying," Wade replied. "You didn't bring destruction, Catherine. You brought resurrection." They walked slowly through the cemetery, past old graves and new, past the section where the committee's victims lay properly honored at last. Mrs. Martinez had planted desert roses beside each marker, beauty rising from sorrow. "The territorial governor wants to give you a commendation," Catherine said, "for your role in exposing the conspiracy. I don't deserve commendation for finally doing what I should have done 20 years ago. But you deserve recognition for doing it at all. Most men would have protected themselves, especially after losing everything." They reached a small hill overlooking the town. Haven Creek spread below them, its buildings a mixture of old adobe and new timber construction. The sound of hammering echoed as crews worked on the school. Children played in the streets their parents had once walked in fear. "Stay," Wade said suddenly, the word escaping before he could reconsider. I know you have a life in Philadelphia, a career, but I already decided to stay. Catherine interrupted. I sent Edmund my resignation yesterday. Wade turned to face her fully. You did. The Truth Teller needs a permanent editor. This town needs honest journalism. And she paused, color rising in her cheeks. I need to be where truth matters more than comfort, with someone who understands that. Catherine. Wade pulled her closer. Propriety be damned. These 6 months, working beside you, building something honest from the ashes of lies. I haven't felt this alive since before my wife died. Maybe ever. I came here for a story, she said, her hands resting on his chest. I found something more, a place that needs truth-telling, people brave enough to change, and a man who chose conscience over comfort when it mattered most. Wade gestured toward the town. It won't be easy. The committee's gone, but their influence lingers. Some families still resent what we did. There are those who prefer the old ways. Then they'll have to face honest reporting about it, Catherine said with a slight smile. The Truth Teller will hold everyone accountable, including you, Sheriff. Especially me. Wade agreed. That's how it should be. A freight wagon rolled up Main Street, stopping at the newspaper office. Wade recognized the cargo, a modern printing press from San Francisco. Catherine's investment in the town's future. Sam Fletcher and several young men immediately gathered to help unload it. Your press arrived, Wade observed. Our press? Catherine corrected. I've incorporated the paper. The women who testified are all shareholders. Mrs. Chen will handle distribution. Mrs. Martinez will manage advertising. We're building something that can't be controlled by a few powerful men. They walked back toward town, passing the Garrison Ranch, now deeded to the school as an agricultural teaching facility. Young people would learn farming and ranching there, building futures on land that had seen too much death. I received a letter from the Pinkerton Agency, Catherine said as they walked. They want me to investigate similar situations in other towns. Apparently, Haven Creek wasn't unique. Wade felt a chill. Are you considering it? I told them I was committed here, but I suggested they hire some of the women who testified. Mrs. Patterson especially, she has a talent for investigation. Catherine smiled. The world needs more truth-tellers. They reached the sheriff's office where Sam Fletcher waited with coffee. Real coffee. Not the bitter chicory they'd subsisted on during the crisis. He'd set out 3 cups, assuming Catherine would join them as she did most mornings now. The mayor wants to know about security for the Harvest Festival, Sam said. Mayor Rodriguez is actually asking instead of telling. Wade was amused. The new mayor, elected from the Mexican community that had been marginalized under committee rule, was still finding his footing. Times have changed. Sam grinned. He says he wants transparency in all town decisions. Catherine pulled out her notebook. I'll need to cover the festival. First one without the committee's control. It'll be interesting to see how the town celebrates when it's actually free. Wade watched her make notes. This woman who'd arrived seeking vengeance and stayed to build justice. The afternoon light caught the auburn in her hair, and he remembered that first day, watching her descend from the stage like an avenging angel. Now she was something more: partner, conscience, future. I have something for you, he said, pulling a small box from his desk drawer. Inside lay a simple gold band. Nothing fancy, just honest metal for an honest promise. It was my mother's. She was a truth-teller, too, in her way. Catherine set down her pen, her hands trembling slightly as she took the ring. Nathan Wade, are you proposing in your office with your deputy as witness? I'm proposing everywhere, all the time, every day until you say yes, Wade replied. Marry me, Catherine. Help me build a town where truth matters, where the vulnerable are protected, where justice means something. Yes, she said simply, slipping the ring onto her finger. Yes, to all of it. Sam Fletcher whooped, then blushed at his outburst. But his joy was infectious. And soon others had gathered: Mrs. Chen from her shop, Mrs. Martinez from the boarding house, the young families who'd chosen truth over comfort. A wedding, Mrs. Chen exclaimed. The first honest celebration this town has had in 20 years. That evening, Wade and Catherine sat at their shared desk in the newspaper office, him reviewing deputy reports, her writing tomorrow's editorial. The printing press stood ready, type already set for the morning edition. Their coffee cups matching china with blue willow pattern sat side by side. Catherine's typewriter ribbon needed changing, and Wade helped her thread the new one, their fingers working together with practiced ease. Through the window, Haven Creek settled into peaceful evening, no longer shadowed by secret violence. "What will you write about when all the corruption is exposed?" Wade asked. "The rebuilding, the people choosing hope, the ordinary courage of everyday life." She smiled. "Mrs. Collins is teaching children who were forbidden education under the committee. The Mexican families are opening businesses on Main Street. The Chinese miners are forming a legal union. Every day brings stories worth telling." Wade pulled out Emma Garrison's diary, which he'd kept close all these months. She would have loved this, seeing her town become what it pretended to be. Her truth started it all, Catherine agreed. A young woman's refusal to accept lies changed everything. As night fell over Haven Creek, Wade and Catherine continued working side by side, the sheriff and the journalist, guardians of a fragile peace built on truth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, remnants of the old guard resenting change, newcomers needing integration, the slow work of building genuine community. But tonight, in the lamplit office of the truth teller, two people who'd found each other through pursuit of justice sat together, planning a future where truth wasn't dangerous but essential, where courage was contagious, and where love could grow from the ashes of a town's dark past. The memorial in the cemetery stood sentinel in the darkness, 43 names reflecting moonlight, no longer forgotten but finally, properly, at peace. You know, friend, I've told many stories about the frontier, but this one stays with me. Not because of the mystery or the romance, though both were there. It stays because it reminds me that family isn't always blood, and home isn't always where you started. Nathan Wade spent 20 years in Haven Creek, but he was never truly part of it until he chose truth over comfort. Catherine Sinclair arrived as a stranger seeking justice for one girl, but she became the heart of a community she helped heal. And those 7 women keeping their painful secrets for decades, they were the town's true family, holding memory when everyone else chose forgetting. I think about Mrs. Chen's sewing box, hiding evidence beneath threads and needles, about the widows who turned their grief into patient justice. They teach us that gratitude isn't just for what we receive, but for those who guard truth when speaking it seems impossible. Real family, real community, forms when we stop protecting ourselves and start protecting each other, when we're grateful not for comfortable lies but for uncomfortable truths. Haven Creek became whole when its people chose connection over isolation, testimony over silence. That's what I learned from their story. Sometimes the greatest act of love is simply refusing to let truth die.